resumes and debate continues. Yes, Honorable Blackmore.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As a senior man, I give it to the.
No, you heal? Okay. Is it coming on?
Mr. Speaker, may I move seat for the purpose of the camera, please?
Yes, yes.
Yes.
Have you negotiated with one of your colleagues? Yes, yes, try there. We are having some feedback with the mic, so I'm not sure if this one is going to work, which ensure that all those at the front is working. But we have some feedback problems from since morning. Try it, Honorable Defoe. So this line is a problem. Okay. You want to? Yeah. Yes, Honorable, proceed.
Okay, Mr. Speaker, I rise to give my contribution to the bill for the maintenance of children. I must say I would like to thank the member from La Plaine who very clearly and well articulated the bill that she presented this morning. And I thought after such a thorough presentation and well-done presentation, what was left for me to say? However, I don't know if usually members of Parliament have to speak from their heart, but that is where I want to speak, Mr. Speaker, not from my notes. And the member from VCAS gave a well-deserved articulated rebuttal also on some issues I had coming across the floor when I was a bit confused, so I will not delay any further on that point. And further followed by a social scientist from the senator from Cassie Bruce, again did justice to the rebuttal. So we will move on. My contribution is one of personal nature that is connected to this bill. First of all, being a victim, I describe myself as a victim of receiving no child maintenance growing up and not having a paternal side. So it was very emotional for me. And I think I have done well, but perhaps I could have done maybe much better if I had that contribution from the other side of my parentage. But nonetheless, I persevered. But I can't say not every child may have the will and determination to do so when they are in such a circumstance. Not patting myself on the back, but I always observe what happens in society, and this is one of my hobbies, I must say, observing the society around me. This bill brings us in conformity with the United Nations Convention on the Rights of Children, and if I recall, adopted in 1989, and Dominica signed on in 1990. It may appear to be a long time, but doing the right thing is never too late. So there is no such thing as never too late to do the right thing. So here we have seen a very comprehensive bill after so long coming to Parliament. And it takes time to understand and to come with all of the proper instrument that is required. And from my thorough reading of this bill, I could say that no stone, almost no stone was left unturned. However, bills are usually dynamic and not static. So from time to time, as new realities emerges, we may return to the House to make amendments, and that is fine. Another emotional part or personal aspect I want to bring to this bill. Growing up, I think I have developed a certain sense of humility inside of me. I'm a very empathetic person, and also has graduated towards a high level of generosity. So ever since I was able to earn any sort of meaningful income, quite a significant portion has gone towards the assistance of a lot of people who have suffered from neglect from one parent or the other. So if you notice, I have said one or the other, because usually the connotation is usually dominated by females being affected. But I've had throughout my lifespan having to assist males also who are affected. So it is on both sides of the gender spectrum. And it has taken a lot from me, again, because I say of my generosity, having the empathy towards people and the plight that they go through when they struggle as a single parent. And usually I say to myself that I wish I was born in around 2000, because from this on you had the Labour Party administration coming into power, and a lot has changed for many people who suffered greatly before that. And the member from Cassie Bruce articulated some of these examples this morning: the school fees, the school feeding program, the school books, and the scholarships, and so on. So that has removed some of the pressure from some of the single parents, but not all of it, Mr. Speaker. And so come back to my experience is that it has cost me a lot. And I also would take the opportunity to say that I thank my immediate family now, my wife and so on, for being so understanding of expending so much of our resources on the less fortunate and others. And often, it comes back to hide me, or it might come back to bite me in my own home, when I say that we cannot afford certain things, but it will come back to say, but you're helping so many people, and that is why you cannot afford. So that is why I'm very, very happy for this bill that is being presented, because I can see relief for me, Mr. Speaker. Very seriously, I can see relief for me, because it's not something, it's something I take very personal. It takes a lot from me, and even more so in my current capacity as a member of parliament for my constituency, that I have devoted even more of my time and resources in addressing these matters. So here, in many times, I have to assist individuals in these areas where we know in our small communities, perhaps we know who the father is or who the mother is, and perhaps they may have a bigger car than us, a bigger house than us, more disposable income than us, because we see them, how they live, but yet still you have to take care of their children, Mr. Speaker. So this bill creates an avenue so that these people will no longer have a free ride, so that now I can concentrate on other aspects of society and have disposable income to support other aspects of society, Mr. Speaker. And Mr. Speaker, many times, in my own personal experience, um, these people are frowned upon by those members of society, because they say them, so and so is your father, so and so is your mother, how come you in that situation? And these children have no power on their own to challenge these parents. And you see there in the Child Maintenance Act, even at a certain age, you can have the right to make your own applications, okay, for child maintenance. And also, but the most critical in this child maintenance part, because is in these four parts, is that the system now provides the enabling environment in all aspects. And what's what I prefer, like earlier on we spoke of definitions. And if you look at the definition of a child in this act, well, it almost leaves no room for no one to escape. Because many times we have children who may be, who are so-called legally adults, 18 years plus, but they may be ill, or they may have mental illness. And because of these issues, that they are shown aside by their immediate families, the mother and their father. So here we can see in definition that these parents cannot escape from their responsibilities, because it says that even if you're 18 and older and you suffer legally these sort of illnesses, that the parent, there is responsibility to take care of you. And also, there are other aspects, as you can see, that speaks of children who may be in school, again, of adult age, because of 18, but they are still undergoing be it secondary or tertiary education. And then here also they have the opportunity to get the support of their parents. So, Mr. Speaker, my main gist was to build my personal experience and to show that if and when this bill is enacted, that it will create an environment for those affected to seek redress, and then these children can have the ample opportunity and resources that will lend towards the development and relieve the social pressure on the states or for those of us who have empathy, humility, and lots of generosity. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to support this bill before this Honorable House.
Yes,
And
Honorable
also
Blackmore.
show the Honorable Minister that this bill shall be passed into law.
Honorable Blackmore, your mic. Try it again. Yes, try. Yeah, it's on.
Mr. Speaker, I did not see Senator Henderson. To me, she entered there a while ago, but she's missing. And the reason why, Mr. Speaker, I was alarmed and taken aback and perplexed to have heard some of the comments she made on the maintenance of children's bill that is currently before this Honorable House. And Mr. Speaker, when we broke for lunch, and I had the occasion to speak with a public servant, a great Dominican, who is working in social affairs or social services, and she said to me, Honorable Blackmore, we have been working on those bills for more than 14 years. Then I realized I was getting real old, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I'm not sure what you're trying to say, but I know who my father is. I'm sure my children, my future, are my children. And at that stage, I guess she's more than 50 years, more than 40 years. If she's not sure who her father or mother is, or as to what her mother gave the rightful father, I'm very, very sorry, Mr. Speaker. But she can take refuge and comfort under the Status of Children Bill that we just passed that speaks to the presumption of parentage. But I'll leave that there. Mr. Speaker, I wanted us to go back to what the Honourable Minister who just spoke, the member for 37, said just now, and to just further amplify and to give some currency to what he said. Mr. Speaker, in 2004 thereabout, this government, when the government came into office in 2000, but more specifically in 2004, when we started going for the social transformation of this country, this government was obliged to have done, at that time, certain practical things to elevate the welfare and well-being and preserve the well-being of our children. You heard the Prime Minister quite eloquently made reference to what we have done thus far. But what we're doing now is taking it to a next level, is upgrading our laws, and to say now is the time as parents to play an active role in preserving the welfare and the well-being of your children, Mr. Speaker. And I think it is very important for us to understand and to underscore that. Mr. Speaker, going back to Senator Henderson, I can recall a song from Mighty Peaky in the 80s. It says, I'm not saying it, $80 for Sonia, $80 for Joan. That was in the 80s, when certainly it was a drafting error, in my estimation, to have assigned a maximum, Mr. Speaker. What it did, Mr. Speaker, it prevented the court from looking at the circumstances of that parent, mother of a child, insofar as that parent's income capability is, and to adequately make an order that will give rise to the proper maintenance and sustenance of that child. What we're seeking to do, Mr. Speaker, by assigning a minimum of $75, in other words, that's the lowest the court can go in assigning an order insofar as the maintenance of a child is concerned. Mr. Speaker, you will know that over the years, more so now, we are seeing the rise in inflation and the consequential impact on the cost of living. And when we came to that minimum of $75, it wasn't done arbitrarily. As I've said, that I was involved in all those bills. What we did, it was sent to the Ministry of Social Services. So therefore, there was a certain element of scientific data that had to be collated and to assist in arriving at a reasonable minimum. Looking at the consumer price index, Mr. Speaker, etc., etc. Now, you go see the student, the school children. The syllabus changing every year. The number of books a child has to carry today to go to school. And the cost or the prices of those books, Mr. Speaker, are ridiculously high. Alas, Papa Bondi. $75 a week for a child. Yeah, there's a situation where you might not be able to afford to do that. But the court, what the law does is to broaden the abilities of the court, okay, to look at the circumstances of that parent insofar as your ability is to support that child. So the court will apply the standards that it be applied and to ask a question, etc. So, Mr. Speaker, that is important, and I think that the senator for a woman, more so, erred in not paying attention to the substantive issues contained therein in the bill that is before this House. This is a very serious matter. And it's them so, I use that word them so, like, it's them so that pointing fingers at the government, you know. So the government not doing anything. Playing politics. I always said that, you know. I had, initially when you came to this honorable House, I had high hopes when I saw the composition of that side, young people. But Mr. Speaker, it is clear some of them, men bet, men poll, Mr. Speaker. So
Please interpret.
Yes, you can ask me to elaborate. Yes. Huh? Same year, same color, whatever it means, you understand? Same thing.
Mem bet, mem poll is same
But
here, same animal.
Paul is here, Mr. Speaker.
Okay.
Paul is here, Shive. Shive. Yes, sir, Shive.
Yes.
What is here? Fur. What want to say? Oh, fur. Oh, Mr. Speaker. You know? Okay. So, this is not a joke. She's back now. You cannot come in this honorable House and trivialize such an important matter. Our children have been suffering for too long. And there are people who can afford to support their children. And they're having a good time about it, and the children are suffering. You should be supporting that. Mr. Speaker, I want to pay attention, with your permission, before I wind down, to 5 sections in this bill, which I think that the public need to be properly apprised of. As you heard from the minister who spoke before me, he made reference to section 3, subsection 3. That speaks to the definition of a child. And that is important for us to understand. Under the age of 18, but there are circumstances where a child suffers from mental illness, and that child is not able to reasonably, on a daily basis, provide for his or herself because of the mental or physical ailment that child may have. That child, because that child is characterized as a vulnerable group, unable to fend for his or herself, is protected and given refuge under this bill. And that is progressive thinking, Mr. Speaker. And we have to commend this bill to this honorable House, not to do what Senator Henderson did. Mr. Speaker, and of course, you heard the honorable minister when she brilliantly presented. I must commend her for that. And in circumstances where a child is under 25, but that child is at a vocational school, at a church school, at the university, that child is also provided for. Mr. Speaker, historically, you find that mothers have to carry the brunt of the struggle to raise a child. But Section 4 of this bill places an obligation on both parents, irrespective as to whether the child is in the custody of the parent or not. Both parents, by virtue of Section 4 of this bill, are obligated to provide for the care, sustenance, and maintenance of that child. That is something I think that we as parents must take into consideration, Mr. Speaker. This bill also is far-reaching. Far-reaching. There are some people who may have money hidden. There are some people who may have their pensions. And Section 12 in this bill provides a specific facility, Mr. Speaker, which you call an attachment to that pension or any income that person may have to ensure that an order of the court, insofar as the maintenance of a child is concerned, can be effected, Mr. Speaker. And I want to commend all the people who have been involved in the process to ensure that we have a bill that is holistic, looking at all the loopholes, the crevices, the corners, before I ask me to well, I don't know, translate, corners, and to close them, and close them very hard, Mr. Speaker. And I think this government and all the people who have been involved in the process thus far must be commended for that. There's something else which is happening also. That fellows now, maybe in a less of the cases, maybe mothers too, but brothers and sisters, we all know. But most of the time, see my man take away his enfants. The mothers are the ones seeing most of the time. Right? My mother dead, my father is dead, and I was very close to my mother. So I can tell you. All right? So I'm calling all of us to pay attention to Section 25 of this bill. Section 25 of that bill provides the court with a specific power and facility to prevent men from taking off overseas, from going away overseas, to evade a court order insofar as the maintenance of a child is concerned. So if you're thinking of taking off, after this bill is enacted, and the court has effected an order for you to maintain a child, the court can stop you and put you in the calaboose where you rightly believe. You belong to the calaboose. Mission stay. So you want to go overseas and dance and wool a cow and you're not supporting your child. Okay? You want to go where? Yes, Creole, because you can understand Creole. But what you can really understand now? What you can understand right here? What you really can understand now? Seriously speaking. I don't know why
He said huleko, he said dance.
Yes.
You know he translated before.
Huleko. Roll yourself. Yeah. Thank you very much, yeah. Yes, thank you. That's okay, I'll leave you alone. Because you don't understand, you don't wear glasses. I know you guys put glasses on your face. Or you come in parliament with glasses on, or you still not seeing good light. Son? Mr. Speaker. No, Mr. Speaker. There is something now, Mr. Speaker. Yeah. There is something else. If you live in a glass house, don't throw stones. All right? Mr. Speaker, there's another situation before I sit I want to reference. And the Prime Minister referenced that briefly this morning. But I think it needs further amplification. Because it is a constant. The Jazz Festival coming, eh? Yes. And the Jazz Festival is like a beauty contest. Right? All artificial hair finish, I understood in Dominic. All extension for nails, finish. All different things finish in the country because people are preparing for jazz. That's cool. You can dress nice, feel nice, but you have children to take care of. And I sympathize with the Honorable Minister, member for P7. I know how it feels. I've lived it and I'm going to live it. But I am asking you also, if the court issues an order and say that you must pay X amount of money by way of an order for the maintenance of John Blow, and you use that money by virtue of Section 26 of the Act, or the intended Act, which is now a bill before us. It's called a misapplication of funds. And there is a custodial sentence so imposed by Section 26. If you use that money, if the mother gave you the money, because in some cases, in few cases, I have a partner in Kenville, they have 4 children living with him, it's the father and mother at the same time. But it's a minor, men have to feel the experience sometimes too, to understand what women are going through. But if you get that money from the court, and you use it to go and buy your nice clothes for jazz festival, that's hypothetical, the bill is not in effect yet, right? Or Korean festival coming, let's do Korean festival coming in October. And the father who has made that money at the court by way of court can prove that that money was misapplied, wrongly used. Instead of taking the money to go towards the maintenance of that child, you take it to buy nice clothes or nice shoes, okay? You can be sent to jail for 3 months or a fine can be imposed of $1,000, Mr. Speaker. It's important for all and sundry to understand all the elements of the bills that we are passing. These bills are far-reaching, they are progressive, and they are consistent with the national reset that we are talking about. Now is the time to do things you can do for yourself. Now is the time to take care of the children if you're so able to do. And we are blocking every crevice, every loophole to ensure that adults who can afford it live up to their responsibility and to ensure that they take care of the children that they themselves, by their own action, brought to this earth, Mr. Speaker. And it should not be left, therefore, for somebody else to do. I thank you, Mr. Speaker, and I support this measure before this honorable House.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I may proceed?
Yes, you may proceed.
Before I proceed, let me just beg your permission to deliver my presentation from this current seat.
Your permission granted.
All right, thank you.
And moving forward, if we are getting challenges with the mic, permission is granted. You don't have to ask because we are getting some technical difficulties. So just move, and since I recognize you, you can proceed. Okay, Honorable Senator.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise this afternoon to fully support this Maintenance of Children Bill of 2023 that has been put before this Honorable House. It is most certainly a privilege to stand here and lend my voice in support of such a critical and timely bill, which will greatly benefit the children and families of this nation. Mr. Speaker, with your permission, I would like to refer to my notes from time to time.
Permission granted.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I would like to take a moment to acknowledge and pay tribute to the advocates who have paved the way for this important legislation. My grandmother, Speaker Emerita, Honorable Alex Boyd Knight, was a trailblazer in the field of child protection, women, and family-related matters. She is a tested and respected figure who worked tirelessly to protect and improve the lives of our nation's children. It is thanks to individuals like her that we have been able to build upon the progress that has already been made in this area. Mr. Speaker, the Maintenance of Children Act is yet another significant step forward in promoting the well-being of our children and ensuring that they have access to the resources that they need to thrive. It will also help to alleviate some of the financial burdens that single parents often face when trying to raise their children alone. Mr. Speaker, as we debate on this proposed legislation, I would like to take a moment to highlight the long-standing commitment of this government to the care and support to the children of Dominica. While some may suggest that this bill is long overdue, it is important to note that this Dominica Labour Party administration has always been and will continue to be at the forefront of promoting the well-being of our children. Through a wide range of social programs, like our Prime Minister mentioned, inclusive of initiatives to provide school books to children, transportation, uniforms, free healthcare to those who are under the age of 18, our Prime Minister and this government has consistently demonstrated an unwavering dedication to ensuring that our children have the resources and support that they need to succeed. As we move forward with this legislation, let us remember that this government has a proud legacy of caring for our children, Dominica's children. Mr. Speaker, in order to fully understand and appreciate the importance of this bill, it is important to consider the shortcomings of previous legislation regarding child maintenance. The current bill which we are debating aims to address these issues by providing a comprehensive framework for child maintenance. Mr. Speaker, one of these clauses is Section 9, which refers to the interim maintenance order. Mr. Speaker, this is a critical piece of legislation that allows for the court to make a temporary order for maintenance payments while the court case is ongoing. Mr. Speaker, what this means is that our children will not have to wait for extended periods for maintenance payments to be made, and that parents who are struggling to make ends meet will have access to the financial assistance while the case is being resolved. Mr. Speaker, while I myself may not be a parent just yet, hopefully soon, who knows? But I have friends and I have colleagues who have children, and I understand through them that raising a child can be a difficult and expensive venture or task. More importantly, this administration understands that raising a child can be a difficult and expensive task, and that there are families who struggle to make ends meet. This interim maintenance order is designed to provide support and assistance to those who need it the most and ensure that children are able to grow up in an environment that is safe, that is healthy, and that is stable. Mr. Speaker, I now turn to the attachment order. And I know the Honorable Minister for National Security touched on it, but I just want to dive a little bit deeper into this very, very critical piece of legislation. This legislation makes provisions for the court to make an attachment order. Essentially, this order allows for the automatic deduction of child maintenance from the income of the respondent. An attachment order ensures that child maintenance payments are made regularly and on time, which in turn eliminates the possibility of missed or delayed payments, which can cause financial hardship for the child. An attachment order also reduces the burden of collecting child maintenance payments on the applicant. The applicant no longer has to chase the other party for payments to receive the support that they need for the child. This order simplifies the payment process, making it easier and more efficient for both parties, Mr. Speaker. Moreover, this legislation also has provisions for penalties for non-compliance, including holding employers personally liable for the payment should the employer fail to make the deduction in compliance with the attachment order. Mr. Speaker, I believe that this in itself is sending a clear message that this administration is taking child maintenance seriously and will not tolerate parents who neglect their financial obligations towards their children. And this is further strengthened by the enforcement measures stipulated in Clause 27, subsection 2 and 3, Mr. Speaker. Now, Mr. Speaker, I'm pretty sure that there are some parents out there who are scratching their head right now saying, oh, look, this gone up, that gone up, now look, child maintenance gone up. And some, the concern arises, after I pay my long money, how can I ensure, my long money in our local parlance, of course, how can I ensure that the monies paid are being appropriately used? What forms of redress are presented in this new bill? Mr. Speaker, this is a bill which places emphasis on this issue. Don't think you can abuse the system. No. This bill provides penalties for those who misapply the funds provided, like our Minister of National Security mentioned. We are dealing with human beings, and we have to be very cognizant of the fact that some parents may be tempted to misuse the funds that they receive. And this is why we have put measures in place to ensure that the money is used for its intended purpose. Any parent who is found to have misapplied these funds will face consequences, including fines and confinement. Mr. Speaker, I take note of the seriousness of this legislation. In fact, I take note of the seriousness of this legislation how it views such a situation. In fact, Mr. Speaker, from my research in looking at the original Maintenance Act, Clause 15 of that act, to be precise, has the fine set at a mere $120 for persons who misapply monies paid by any person in support of the child. This new bill before the Honorable House makes provisions for a fine of $1,000, Mr. Speaker, or imprisonment of 3 months. Mr. Speaker, I'm of the view that this is not only historic legislation, but it is fair, it is just, and it is all-encompassing. And it looks at the issue of child maintenance from every aspect. Mr. Speaker, as I close, I wish to emphasize that this legislation is not just about financial support. It is about ensuring that our children grow up in an environment that is safe, that is healthy, and that is loving. I implore all parents to take their responsibilities seriously and fulfill their obligations to their children. Let us not wait for the court to step in and remind us to do what is right. We already know what is expected of us, and it is time to step up and do what is right for the well-being of our children, Dominica's children. Once again, I wholeheartedly support this bill placed before this honorable House. Thank you, and God bless Dominica.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah, this one works.
Senator, you can try the one behind. Behind. No, you can't use where Senator Roll is. You use where Senator Paris is. Yeah. Just put it down. Yeah. Okay. Yes. Proceed, Senator Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, when I got the order paper for today's meeting of the Parliament, it was about 7 days ago today, I opened the envelope, and it's quite a thick document, very thick. So I read through the bills, and I was indeed genuinely elated that finally, after over 20 years or more of advocacy and discussion on drafting and redrafting of these 5 OECS family law reform bills, that finally these pieces of legislation were up for discussion and debate and passage in the Parliament. So I continue to look through the envelope, Mr. Speaker, and to my my surprise and disappointment, I was expecting, Mr. Speaker, at the very least, a white paper on electoral reform. At the very least, Mr. Speaker.
Senator, stick to the bill.
Mr. Speaker,
Stick.
I just mentioned electoral reform once, and I intend to
Yes,
move on from there.
but I'm guiding early so you don't go down that road. Let's stick to the bill.
Yeah, I am, Mr. Speaker.
Please.
I am.
So far, the debate is going well. I mean, have little jabs in between on both sides. I'm okay with this. Do not go down that electoral reform road. No. Let's stop that right now. Stick to the bill.
Mr. Speaker, credit must go, when we're speaking about these bills, credit must go to the OECS Commission through their Social Development Unit, the Ministry of Social Services in Dominica. At one point it was called the Ministry of Community Development and Gender Affairs, the Aegis Chambers in Dominica, and indeed the work over many, many years of child advocates like Martin Anthony, who I saw this morning, Gloria Augustus, Rosie Brown, Gemma Azil, among others. And I'm sure they're very happy that after all these years of advocacy and discussion on issues to do with children and the problems of children that we have before us, these pieces of legislation. And Mr. Speaker, I do agree. The reforms, the bills that have been proposed are radical, they are far-reaching, and they're very bold. And I believe the government must be commended, yes, but we must not forget that this is an OECS-wide reform initiative. I just want to make a few brief observations. Much has been said about the minimum amount of money needed, or not already needed, but the minimum amount of money that should be paid to a child of $75. Now, Mr. Speaker, I agree, yes, it's a minimum, it's not a maximum, I do agree. But from my experience, Mr. Speaker, even that amount of $75 in today's Dominica, many people that I know will find it hard to even meet that $200 a month. Very, very difficult, Mr. Speaker. I know people, these men, they're not working. Those who are working, Mr. Speaker, many of them are on incomes even below the minimum wage. I know persons who are on $1,000 a month, $800 a month. And I know that figure of $300 a month would indeed for them, they'll be hard pressed to find that money to fulfill the obligation to their children. And so, Mr. Speaker, while the government has a number of social programs designed to assist the vulnerable, I believe, Mr. Speaker, that the ultimate answer to that is to build an economy that will create well-paying jobs, that persons have to rely less on government and more on themselves to meet their financial obligations. Mr. Speaker, it is never good that government, everything is government. That level of social welfare we have here in Dominica is not sustainable. It is clearly not sustainable. And before we find ourselves in difficulties down the road, ultimately, Mr. Speaker, for persons, fathers out there, to meet their commitments, whether they're married in a marital relationship or not, they need to have well-paying jobs so they can honor their obligations. But I do admit, Mr. Speaker, that you have fathers out there who are able to pay to meet the costs of their children's upbringing, but refuse to pay. And although the present law, the law which we're about to, the bill before the House, the sanctions are quite strict. I believe I'm suggesting that there are other measures we could take to make it even stiffer. And one of them is, I believe, fathers who do not meet the obligations to their children. What about the possibility of losing the driver's license temporarily, for example? I think that should be a serious consideration. In some cases, what about losing your gun license for those who have guns? Also, Mr. Speaker, you have situations where there are persons who sell property, they sell land, they sell houses, and yet you find that they actually owe in child maintenance. I think there should be some mechanism to ensure that persons who receive money from the sale of land, sale of house, whatever it is, that before that they receive that money, somehow, that the money is owed for child maintenance can be given to the children. Also, Mr. Speaker, there are persons who win the lottery, for example. You might get there's a windfall, or perhaps somebody has died and left property for you. In those instances, Mr. Speaker, I believe that person's children, the state should use the levers at its disposal to ensure that child maintenance obligations are met by those persons. So, Mr. Speaker, it is very true, as I said earlier, that these pieces of legislation are uncontroversial. Having read through them, having consulted persons who are familiar or more familiar with the issues, I think all of us on this side of the House are in full and undiluted support of the bills before the House, and we have no reservations whatsoever in supporting the bills that are before the House. And of course, we're hoping that, very importantly, you can have bills and you can have laws, but the important thing is implementation. And so I was encouraged to hear at the last press conference of the Prime Minister when he stated that more resources will be made available to ensure that government departments are strengthened so that we can actually see some of the measures and provisions actually implemented, because the key for me and for all of us really is implementation. So this brief intervention, Mr. Speaker, I fully endorse the bill before the House at this time. Thank you.
Yes, Honorable Henderson, proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I didn't think it was necessary to make a contribution on this debate, not because I don't see the significance of it, for after all, it has far-reaching implications that we need to highlight. I felt that my colleagues had done an excellent job, from the presenter, Dr. Williams, the member for La Plaine, who presented, and my colleagues who spoke after, and especially the Minister for Legal Affairs, who himself has been pursuing this, and I want to commend Senator Blackmore for his leadership to ensure that we got to the stage where today we can debate the bill. So I also want to join my colleagues and the Prime Minister in commending those who have provided support. I remember former Minister Dr. Addis King as Minister for Social Services, who was steadfast in ensuring that we push this bill through very painstakingly, and today we are here. But Mr. Speaker, I just want to speak to a few issues that were raised by Senator Douglas, who for some reason have me reminiscing of the days of the late Rosie Douglas, not by his articulation, but perhaps by his attire. Very interesting combination of colors, as Rosie would do. But, Mr. Speaker, in particular, he spoke to the depletion of, well, sorry, he spoke to the issue that there may be fathers or parents against whom a maintenance order exists. And for some reason, maybe depleting their assets, selling property, and the child maintenance is not paid. But I just want to highlight that the bill at section 15 provides for a special mechanism, not precisely what he spoke to, but it provides for a mechanism where the High Court may, on application, make an interim or final order restraining the depletion of a person's property that would impair or defeat the making of a maintenance order. So in other words, if the parent owns property and they intend to go ahead and sell the property and not pay for their child maintenance, the court could make an order to prevent the sale of that property. And it's also important to note that getting back to the minimum amount that is required to be paid weekly, which is $75, as per section, I think it's section 6.5, where the court orders the payment of a weekly sum. The sum shall not be less than $75 weekly. But the important thing is that this is the minimum, and we arrive at this minimum after considering all the factors that you have to consider. A very difficult balancing act, I must say. There are those who prefer perhaps a reference amount, as in some jurisdictions. But I think what the legislation does that strengthens that minimum is the fact that section 7.2 speaks to the other factors to be considered. Notwithstanding, or I should go straight into, the court shall have regard to the following matters in making a maintenance order. So the court can and will, once the matter is before them, consider the income. And I want to speak particularly to the other line after that, or towards the earning capacity. I want to highlight that because the income is one thing, but the earning capacity. In other words, you have a man that fair, a guy who refuses to work to his full potential or ability. He has the capacity. The man is a skilled builder or something, and decides to hang around and do some menial jobs where he gets some little money. What this does is that the court will, in its judgment, assess that individual, look at all the factors surrounding the properties they own, whatever else. But what I find about this part is the fact that the court can impose an amount that is higher than what you're earning now, which serves as an incentive for the person against whom the order is made to go and find work, go and make money, go and maintain your children. You enjoy yourself, you made a child, you take the responsibility. And I believe that what we're doing here is something that should not be necessary if people were to take their responsibilities seriously. What we are doing is almost seeking to legislate responsible behavior. That should not be for the parliament to do. People should be responsible enough to take care of their children and not abandon their children and leave them as ward of the state. And then people blame us when we provide for these very same children. I think it is more appropriate, Senator Douglas, to speak to those men and women who have abandoned their children so that the resources of the state can be used for other purposes. Because the pressure that it places on all of us, not just as members of parliament, but individually. And what this bill seeks to do is to bring a certain level of responsibility. So the courts will do its own assessment, the financial needs of the child. And I'm very happy for this, because I couldn't believe that there was actually a maximum. So a guy is making hundreds of thousands of dollars a year and he pays the same thing as the guy who's cleaning on the side of the road. I mean, there's no greater injustice that your child should not be provided a standard of living that reflects your own income level. And that is what we should be speaking to, the grave injustice that our children have had to face. And what this bill does is not only, and we speak a lot about the Convention on the Rights of the Child. I mean, that is great. But I don't think that is something to boast about. Convention on the Rights of the Child is a great convention. As a matter of fact, I participated in several debates on that at the United Nations, in Geneva. But the fact is, as a nation, we are judged by our ability to take care of the vulnerable, the voiceless, those who are not able to fend for themselves. So what we are doing today, to me, is a great credit to us as a nation, to be responsible, to ensure that we can take the necessary actions to provide for the defenseless, for the children among us. And I'm also very encouraged by the fact that the bill also takes into account, the physical or mental disability of the child. And I have a very good friend in Wavin Banan, and that one cannot be translated. It's a name of a place. I know a good friend in Wavin Banan in Grand Bay. And she has a disabled child. And when she considers, she's getting assistance from welfare, and we thank you for that. But the pressure it places on her, she cannot go to work. She has to stay home to give care to that child. So all of this has to be considered. All of this must be considered when an order for maintenance is given, the condition of the child. That child needs more care than a child who is not so, challenged. So this is very progressive. This legislation is very, very progressive because it really addresses some very serious issues that we've had to grapple with, for decades. The standard of living enjoyed, by the family while the parents and the child resided together. That's another very important part of this. Because you may have, people living together, they have a child together, the child enjoys a certain quality of life because of the income of the parents. And all of a sudden, one parent goes and the child is no longer able to enjoy that standard of living. Perhaps the child is in school, a private school, and the child cannot continue because they've separated. All of those factors must be considered, and this is in line with, at least I know, I have done family law in New York and family law in Ontario. This is in line with those more advanced economies where they have very strong family acts. And this, I find, is very, very progressive for a country like ours to take on those actions into conformity. Mr. Speaker, I support the bill.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to support the bill. This clearly is, as has been said already, a progressive piece of legislation that this government is seeking to introduce today. And just wanted to add on the record, my full endorsement of this bill and make perhaps one or 2 points. Mr. Speaker, as has been articulated by a number of the speakers already in this debate, this is taking us further forward along the road of providing for children from where we are at the current time. The existing provision for payment of child maintenance, as has been said, is pegged at $75 per week per child. That $75 came in 2001. Prior to that, it was $50. So I just say that to give some sort of historical context. And in fact, it shows that we have been at that rate for a very long time, and at that rate as a maximum. This piece of legislation proposes an amendment to make the minimum $75. So what, as I stand here now, is the maximum will, after this bill is passed, become the minimum. So I hear the voices of saying, well, it should be more, it's not enough, etc., etc. But the point is, and the point that needs to be borne in mind, is that this gives the flexibility. So, for example, in the example given by the previous speaker, the member for Granby, where he pointed out quite correctly that people have different means. And what rationale can there be for somebody who's making significant, has significant resources? What rationale can there be for that person to be obligated to pay just, for example, a maximum of $75? With the current provision, the court can take all the circumstances into account, can determine that this is a person who can and should pay a significantly higher sum, and make an order to that effect. In other words, there's no top ceiling. Obviously, one would expect the court to be reasonable in its order, but reasonableness will depend on the particular circumstances. And of course, I would hope that we see a significant improvement in the provision of maintenance for children after the passage of this current bill. It's also noticeable, Mr. Speaker, Clause 4 of the bill, which will become Section 4 once the bill is enacted, gives a 14-year-old the opportunity, in the wording of the bill, on his own behalf, to make an application. So that is certainly, I suggest, a radical move. So obviously, the parent has the capacity and is provided the opportunity to make an application. But if you have a child who gets to the age of 14, mother has decided, it's usually the mother, sometimes it's father, but usually it is a mother who is going to court. But you have a child who's 14 and one or other parent is not providing support. That 14-year-old has now the opportunity of making an application should the specific parent not do so. And that's a Clause 5. Mr. Speaker, it is also notable that at Clause 12, reference is made to attachment orders. The provision as it is in the bill may not capture the situation or scenario put forward by Senator Douglas, but it may do, depending. The reason I say that, I say may do, is that Clause 12 provides for attachment orders to be made in relation to a person's pension. So someone who has been ordered by the court to maintain their child and is not doing so, an attachment order can be made in respect to that person's pension. But in relation to somebody who doesn't have a pension, or even if they do have a pension, there are other means, it also provides that an attachment order can be made in respect to income. Clause 12, the court may make an attachment order in respect of any pension or income that is capable of being attached. So it may well be that the particular scenario that Senator Douglas put forward, it may be a one-off. So if it's a one-off payment, the chances are that in that circumstance, an attachment order will not be of much help. But somebody who has, for example, an ongoing contract and is not meeting their obligations, then it is possible for an attachment order to be made commanding whoever is making the payments to that person to stop the appropriate amount that would be stated in the attachment order and to pay that over to the court to be paid to the mother or father of the child, as the case may be. And what is also interesting is that in respect of these situations, it really is not closed. So it's any situation in which somebody is receiving income. Once it's able to be identified and it is of a nature that would allow for the time and so on to be able to make an attachment order, then that provides an avenue to force or enforce payment, so to speak. And that is also coupled with clause 15 that the member for Granby has already referred to. So, Mr. Speaker, all in all, it is very clear that this piece of legislation is taking us further forward from where we are at the moment. It is perhaps long overdue, but as they say, better late than never. What I do hope is that henceforth we will find that this piece of legislation will be pursued with the vigor that it deserves. Mr. Speaker, whilst I'm on my feet, I perhaps should just address this. It's a matter that we will deal with at committee stage. But it was drawn to my attention personally and to other members of the House, the attention of other members of the House, that a bill which is not before the House, so I won't speak on it, other than to say that the maintenance bill, which is on the order paper and will be debated at some point, provides for the repeal of chapter 35, 61. And that's the existing Maintenance Act. And in doing so, an important provision in that act would be no more, but it hasn't been provided for in the Maintenance of Children bill, which is before the House. I believe it should be. I believe it's important. It's a provision, section 28 in the existing Maintenance Act, chapter 3561, which provides that where an order for maintenance has been made against a parent under section 4, or a man has been adjudged to be the putative father of a child under section 9, the magistrate may, A, at the time of making the order, or B, upon application by the parent at any time thereafter, make an order granting the parent the right of access to the child on such terms and conditions as the magistrate thinks fit. Well, Mr. Speaker, that, in my humble and respectful submission, is an important provision, because what it does is allows the court, when making an order for payment for the child, to also make an order for the parent who is now having to pay these monies through the court to also be granted for, access to that child. There are situations where one parent brings the other to court for child maintenance. The court makes the order for payment. The parent is paying, but the parent with custody chooses to continue whatever the challenges they may have between them by denying the paying parent access to the child. This provision, if it is adopted, would mean that the court, in appropriate circumstances, so in other words, where it is appropriate for there to be contact between the paying parent and the child, it would now allow for the court to be able to make an order for that parent to have access, whether it's on a weekday, evenings, weekend, whatever, as the case may be. And the normal process is that the court, in collaboration with the parties, would draw up whatever the contact schedule is. So Mr. Speaker, I think whilst I was on my feet, I thought it useful to take the opportunity to make reference to that, because it's something that will come up at committee, and I certainly wanted to take the opportunity, whilst we are actually in the course of the debate, to make reference to it so that it could be known to all and sundry, and even those within these walls who may want to speak to that as well would have the opportunity of doing so. Mr. Speaker, with those few words, I will resume my seat. I give my full endorsement to the bill.
Mr. Speaker, in winding up the debate, it is clear that the majority of members of the House, based on the sentiments expressed and observations, have absolutely no doubt that the incoming law on maintenance of children will be very beneficial to them and their families. I will respectfully but emphatically reject the preposterous recommendations made earlier. I think of the
Speak closer to the mic.
The paternity.
Yes, too far.
Obligatory paternity testing. I'm afraid that this didn't go down too well with us, but I'm sure by now the Honorable Senator realizes the error of that utterance. Children do have entitlements, one of which is to be maintained by both parents. This is abundantly clear in the bill. Maintenance of a child is not left only to a father, but an obligation of both parents. Mr. Speaker, we cannot lose sight of the purpose of the bill, which is to promote children's welfare and best interests and facilitate their development by helping to ensure that appropriate arrangements are in place for their maintenance and care and recognize certain rights of children. Our children are the cornerstone of our nation's development, and we have a sacred duty to protect and nurture them. By passing this bill, we are demonstrating our commitment to our youth, ensuring that they have the necessary resources and support to grow into strong, capable citizens. This bill will augur well for our children's future and set our society on a progressive path towards social stability. I wish to wholeheartedly commend this bill for passage into law.
This concludes the debate. It has been moved and seconded that the bill shortly entitled Maintenance of Children Act 2023 be read a second time. Those in favor? Aye. Those against? The ayes have it. The bill now stands committed to a committee of the whole House to be considered clause by clause. House is in committee. I spoke with AG on some of my the bill to the House. The bill shortly entitled Maintenance of Children Act 2023 passed the committee stage with minor amendments. The question is that the report of the committee on the bill be adopted as amended. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it.
Mr. Speaker, I move that the bill shortly entitled Maintenance of Children Act 2023 be read a third time and passed.
Second.
Second, Mr. Speaker.
It has been moved and seconded that the bill shortly entitled Maintenance of Children Act 2023 be read a third time and passed. Those in favor? Those against? The ayes have it. The bill has been read a third time and passed accordingly.
I move the second reading of the bill shortly entitled Children Care and Adoption Act 2023.
Seconded, Mr. Speaker.
Mr. Speaker, one of the 5 bills before the House is the Children Care and Adoption Bill, which went through wide consultation and public education, both locally and regionally, before being put into draft by the legal unit of the OECS Commission and further reviewed by the staff at the Office of the Attorney General. This arose from a need to reform and enact new legislation, thereby to afford better access to justice, and in the case of the Children Care and Adoption Bill, to ensure that our children are properly cared for and protected. In that regard, Mr. Speaker, the government of Dominica recognizes its fundamental role and is fully committed to its responsibility to protect children from abuse and neglect, and to ensure that the safety, welfare, and well-being of every child within our society is prioritized. Government remains committed, Mr. Speaker, to efforts that are ongoing to provide better care to our children. This is supported by the initiatives being undertaken by the Child Abuse Prevention Unit of the Welfare Division, such as ongoing collaboration with the main child protection agencies, parenting programs, educational sessions at schools and community level, radio and other media coverage to address child protection issues, psychological intervention for both victims and families, peer counseling training and sessions, use of posters, flyers, and other paraphernalia for educational purposes, marches and walks to denounce child abuse, and competitions among children so as to express their thoughts and opinions on the issue of child abuse. Mr. Speaker, someone may ask, what is the necessity of coming before the House with this bill? Principally, as indicated, such bill is meant to better protect the many children who are often victims of various forms of abuse, sexual and physical, and also neglect. It is instructive to note, Mr. Speaker, that while a level of protection is provided under the Sexual Offences Act only for those sexually victimized, what about those children, for example, who are physically, emotionally, or psychologically abused as a result of being exposed to domestic violence? What about a few children who are sometimes abandoned or likely to be abandoned, or those who are beyond the control of his or her parent or guardian. This is among the intent and purpose of the bill, that is, providing the necessary care and protection to those children. It is important to note as well, Mr. Speaker, that matters of care and protection of children are at present being dealt with under the Children and Young Persons Act of 1970. I emphasize 1970, which shows that for about 53 years there has not been legislative changes to the Act. Given the foregoing, one would no doubt agree that coming before the House with this bill is indeed necessary and highly justified. The bill, which is presented in 16 parts, also seeks to reform the law relating to adoption and to provide for greater supervision of adoption procedures and for the protection of the welfare of the child. It provides for the establishment of an adoption committee to give more governmental control over the adoption process. The preliminary provisions are contained in clauses 1 to 3. Part 1, Administration of the Act, clauses 4 to 11, provides for the administrative procedures for the effective implementation of the bill. Clause 5 addresses the principles to be applied in the adoption of a child and the participation of a child in the adoption process. Clause 7, Office and Director of Social Services. Mr. Speaker, among the important considerations under the bill are the various processes and systems to be established for the care and protection of children, among which is the appointment of a Director of Social Services, who will not only provide oversight on all matters of care and protection of children, like receiving reports, intervention, investigation, and assessment, but also to ensure that the various orders granted by the court are enforced. Part 2, Care and Protection of Children, clauses 12 to 13, identify circumstances in which a child may be considered to be in need of care and protection and for request for assistance. Part 3, Reporting, clauses 4 to 16, provide reporting in respect of a child in need of care and protection of persons who make the reports. Part 4, Investigation and Assessment, clauses 17 to 24, provide for assessment and investigation of reports concerning a child. Part 5, Emergency Protection, clauses 25 to 31, provide for the emergency protection of a child in the stated circumstances. Mr. Speaker, the matter of emergency protection of children has long been anticipated. Where under the emergency situations there is need to immediately remove a child from imminent danger, the court may, on application of the Director of Social Services, with the assistance of a police officer, and without the need for any further authority, enter any place or premises where the child is believed to be present or to reside, and search for, locate, and take the child into custody. Based on reports, certain situations of emergency warrant immediate actions. Part 6, Assessment Orders, clauses 32 to 35, provide for the making of assessment orders. Part 7, Orders for the care and protection of a child, clauses 36 to 72, provide for the order which may be applied to secure the care and protection of a child. Part 8, Children or Child Care Services, clauses 73 to 88, provide for the establishment and maintenance of child care services. Part 9, Adoption Committee, clauses 89 to 95, provide for the establishment, composition, and procedure and functions of an adoption committee. The present Act does not provide for the establishment of any committee to have oversight over an adoption matter. There are many observers who are of the opinion that various structures preliminary to the grant of an adoption order should be reviewed. In having the adoption committee in place, that objective will be achieved. Part 10, placement of a child for adoption. Clauses 96 to 117 stipulate the persons who may apply to adopt a child. Part 11, adoption proceedings. Clauses 118 to 129 provide for court proceedings for the purposes of adoption. Part 12, inter-country adoptions. Clauses 130 to 133 address the required approval for inter-country adoption. Pursuant to Clause 130, the Adoption Committee will enable better control of adoption proceedings, including matters related to inter-country adoption. A person who is not a resident of Dominica may apply to the Adoption Committee for the adoption of a child resident in Dominica. However, the bill provides clear directives as to the requirements of individuals overseas adopting a child, including providing a police record, that the individual has the means to maintain and look after the child in an appropriate manner. Clause 132 speaks to a memorandum of understanding which the government may enter into with the government of another jurisdiction in order to allow collaboration and exchange of information, and also to establish certain safeguards to ensure that inter-country adoption takes place in the best interest of the child and with respect to fundamental rights of the child and as recognized by law. Mr. Speaker, this is a new initiative. Part 13, registration of adoption orders, clauses 134 to 135 is self-explanatory. Part 14, offenses, clauses 136 to 143 stipulate acts that are considered to be offenses in the administration of this bill in relation to a child. Part 15, miscellaneous, clauses 144 to 145 provide for matters that are required for the administration of the bill but do not fall under the other parts of the bill, such as appeals and the making of regulations. Part 16, repeal and transitional provisions, clauses 146 to 149 is self-explanatory. Mr. Speaker, important considerations relate to clause 118 to 133 on the matter of adoption proceedings and inter-country adoption in the best interest of a child. Adoption matters are at present being dealt with under the Adoption of Infants Act of 1949, which is very outdated. Adoption matters will now be processed under the Children Care and Adoption Act. This in itself will help to protect children by ensuring that adoptive parents are well suited to meet the varied needs of the adopted child. Mr. Speaker, it should be further noted that the Children and Young Persons Act also addresses children who may be in conflict with the law. What the framers of the bill, after consultation, have done is to develop a children care and adoption bill with adoption matters incorporated under the bill and draw up a child justice bill which will come before the House in a subsequent sitting. Mr. Speaker, the Children Care and Adoption Bill seeks to reform the law relating to adoption and to provide for greater supervision of adoption procedures. It also provides for individuals to serve on an adoption committee as stipulated in Clause 89 to give more governmental control over the adoption process. Mr. Speaker, the bill subscribes to orders which could be made by the court, including a care order, contact order, contribution order, and emergency protection order, where in cases it is proven that the child is suffering or is likely to suffer harm and is in urgent need of care and protection. In such cases, the children could immediately, in an emergency situation, be physically removed from whatever circumstance which could imminently endanger the life of the child. Mr. Speaker, adoption is a profoundly important decision with lifelong impact for all involved. It is therefore vital, and the adoption process is safeguarded by robust and appropriate laws and policies which consider the interests of children as well as the parents involved. Mr. Speaker, while legislation is extremely important, one no doubt recognizes that other programs and activities must be ongoing to better care and protect children. The social services arm of the ministry's strategic plan will, among other plans, include a regime of multifaceted specialized intervention services targeting families. Mr. Speaker, recognition is also given to human and financial resources which will be invested to care for children and families. The Social Welfare Division is to be restructured with an increase in the staff complement and the establishment of new offices. Mr. Speaker, while government takes actions where necessary, including the passage of legislation, we as Dominicans must be mindful that the care and protection of children is dependent on all Dominicans, particularly parents, who are not only the first providers, but are directly responsible for the care and protection of their children. The wider society should never limit the adage that it takes a village to raise a child. Mr. Speaker, I believe that the societal impact of the new legislation will be far-reaching and largely positive. Additionally, by focusing on the best interest of the child, we are contributing to the overall well-being of our nation's youth and paving the way for a brighter Dominica. With these words, Mr. Speaker, I commend the bill to this honorable House.
The bill is before the House for debate. Try again. Yes, I recognize Honorable Popon Skerrit.
Mr. Speaker, allow me to refer to my notes.
Permission granted.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today to speak on the Children Care and Adoption Bill, a vital piece of legislation that seeks to reform the laws relating to adoption and to provide greater supervision of adoption procedures for the protection and the welfare of the child. As not only a political leader, but as a wife and a mother, and honestly, just as a conscientious, empathetic human being, I refuse to ignore issues surrounding the mistreatment and the mishandling of our children. And it is high time that we take a firm stance to better protect our youngest citizens, because it is they who are the most vulnerable members of our population, and yet upon whom our future of this nation lies. This bill before us, Mr. Speaker, will have a significant impact on the lives of our children in this country. And I am proud to lend my voice to this important conversation. Let us not continuously fail to protect them from preventable and manageable, sometimes life-threatening, if not traumatic situations. This legislation will take an all-encompassing approach to the care and the protection, as well as the adoption of our nation's children. We seek to ensure that the best interest of a child is paramount and forefront in our approach to the future generations. And as such, this bill strives to cover a range of issues as regards to adoption procedures, inter-country adoptions, and the care and the protection of children. A more comprehensive and stringent approach to the safety and well-being of the child will be implemented in these procedures going forward. Dominica is not unique in our need to revamp our old laws and our procedures. It is simply long overdue. The challenges that we face as leaders and lawmakers are indeed numerous, but we are determined not to let the needs of our smallest and the most innocent voices go unheard. The need to enact and enforce proactive and preventative measures that ensure the safety of our youth is, however, crucial for a productive nation and future. There are, quite frankly, countless children who go through life experiences that are far beyond their years. We speak about sexual abuse, physical abuse, verbal, mental, as well as economic disparities, which have created conditions in which many children are living a life of trauma, torture, and helplessness. The undeniable life-altering effects of these experiences are often ignored, misdiagnosed, disregarded, or easily dismissed. But this cannot continue to be left unchecked and to be accepted as a societal norm. Mr. Speaker, in my efforts to truly understand my constituents, their needs, and their struggles, I often find myself reasoning with those who say to me that they feel lost, the guys on the streets, frustrated mothers. They are every bit and part of the fabric of our society, as you and I. And I have noticed that many of them are troubled young men and troubled young women. In these moments, I try to dig deep to get to the core of their issues. And many times I will probe into their childhood and I will ask the question, how did you get to this point? What was your life journey like? Because everyone comes from somewhere. How did you get here? Sadly, Mr. Speaker, I stand here today and say that the majority of them came from broken homes. The male foundation of life, the family life, is broken. The most common thing to say, they say to me, sometimes they refer to me, they say, "Mother, I have no mother, I have no father, I have nobody for me." And so most of them, their stories are quite the same. They end up dropping out of school with little to no support, feeling that they had no choice but to turn to the streets or sometimes selling their bodies as a way of survival. There are many of them who have been given who given the opportunity, would have been in a much better place today, Mr. Speaker, if they were adopted, placed in foster care, and given a better and fair chance at life. At the most vulnerable stage in life, so many of our youth are not experiencing a loving, nurturing home, which is imperative to a stable foundation upon which the character of an adult is formed. Mr. Speaker, there are many untold true stories. Stories which should make any caring human being cringe and pray that God intervenes. For example, Mr. Speaker, recently, a young mother of 3 brought her children to the welfare department division, and she said to them, "If you don't take them away from me, I am afraid that I will do something to them." Let that sink in for a moment. Can you begin to imagine the level of desperation that could lead a mother to these limits? Think about it, Dominicans, because sadly, too often easily cast judgment and dismiss cases such as this. Mr. Speaker, the Welfare Division reached out to me to find out if I knew anyone who would be willing to foster or adopt these 3 innocent children. When I get a call like this, how can I or anyone in a good conscience for that matter not see this as heart-wrenching, as a heart-wrenching scenario and a reflection of insufficient procedures, programs, and lack of the adequate services? I cannot lament enough on how important this urgent cry from the Welfare Division is for the future of our children and our country. With these types of changes that this bill is bringing to the table, there will be an improvement in the capacity of the Welfare Division to assist in unfortunate scenarios just like this one that I referenced. The saying, "It takes a village," is not unfounded. Sometimes, all some of us need is support, guidance, and a little help to find our way. Creating more efficient programs will allow for a far more proactive and effective use of the Welfare Division to address these matters in a timely and competent manner. Other primary changes will be to the streamlining of the adoption process in Dominica. The benefit to this is the potential opportunity that it creates to encourage more people to consider adoption rather than foster parents. The stricter regulations around inter-country adoption will help to prevent unethical or illegal adoption practices, which has unfortunately occurred previously. These 2 crucial benefits brought by these legislative changes could lead to an increase in domestic adoptions, which would reduce the number of children in the foster care system or available for inter-country adoption. It is my firm belief, Mr. Speaker, that the adoption bill also has the capacity to encourage a greater emphasis on family preservation and reunification. This can lead to fewer children being placed for adoption in the first place. This is undoubtedly a positive development as it ensures that children are in a stable and loving home with their biological families when and where possible. The creation of the Adoption Committee will allow for greater accountability, increased transparency, and protection of children in the adoption process. The Adoption Committee is responsible for making decisions that will have a significant impact on a child's future and a child's life. This committee will not only provide oversight, but it will also ensure that all adoption procedures follow the law to the letter, maintaining the highest standards, and always protecting the well-being of the child prior to and throughout the process. It is reassuring to know that there will be checks and balances in place to ensure that the decision-making process is fair and it is just. Allow me to give you some insight into the extent of some of the issues that we face in our current system. For example, the lack of adequate structure, policy, and guidelines around adoption has created loopholes for fraudulent behavior and mismanagement of the process. Currently, any lawyer can prepare an adoption paper in any format without adhering to any standard or regulation. This results in a wide variation in terms of quality of legal services rendered as well as costs for the services rendered. This means that families seeking to adopt have no clarity or consistency in the process and are often at the mercy of lawyers who set their own terms and high prices. Furthermore, Welfare Division, who prepare the Guardian ad litem inquiry report on prospective parents, often charge a fee for their services with no governing legislation or policy to regulate these charges. Additionally, lawyers can write to the Welfare Division naming an officer that they prefer to prepare the adoption report without any vetting process in place. This creates an environment where fraudulent behavior and mismanagement of the adoption process can too easily occur with little or no repercussions. and it is imperative that we establish clear policies and guidelines for adoptions to protect the interests of all parties involved, but specifically our littlest and our most unprotected. We owe it to our children, Mr. Speaker, and to families who seek to adopt, to create a system that is fair and is just, transparent, and accountable, with the ultimate goal of finding permanent, stable homes for children who cannot live with their birth families. As lawmakers, it is our prerogative and our duty to enact and enforce policies that protect the most vulnerable members of our society, and this bill here before us represents our effort to do just that. As a matter of fact, the well-being of our children is at the core of every section, clause, letter, and punctuation mark within the formation of this bill before us. If it isn't already obvious, this administration will be clear and concise. We, as a nation, are firmly resolved to securing positive, constructive, and uplifting futures for our children, regardless of their backgrounds, upbringing, or family origins. A society that cultivates and supports a positive foundation in every child's growth and development stimulates a healthy and productive future population, citizenry, and nation. And like the Bible says, Mr. Speaker, the shepherd left his 99 sheep and he searched high and low for his one lost sheep. And then he rejoiced, moreover, that this one sheep that he found than the 99 who didn't go astray. And so today, Mr. Speaker, we rejoice because in this new reset, this Labour Party government will continue to bring back to the fold the disadvantaged and the marginalized children, and we shall rescue them from all their domestic harm. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, proceed, Senator.
Mr. Speaker, I rise to give support to this bill at this moment before this court. Firstly, I would like to applaud the Honorable Minister for the Roseau North constituency, Ms. Honorable Williams, for bringing forth Williams.
For that plane.
Yeah, for being the one to introduce these bills before this court, because I personally know her love for children, how much she loves and cares for them. So I'd like to applaud her, firstly. Secondly, I would like to ask permission to refer to my notes, regardless of the fact that my dear Honorable Minister from Baker said to discard it.
Permission granted.
Mr. Speaker, children are special. Children are a gift, children are a blessing. Seeing that many people right now have chosen to quote the Bible, I shall quote it as well. Even God said, be fruitful and multiply, so God knew what he was speaking about right there. Any bill brought before this house in regards to the betterment of children and family, there's nothing to oppose, nothing to not agree on. However, one can give insights on ways they feel or think could better, effectively pass on these bills. With that being said, I'd like to touch on three things. I'm going to be straight to the point, straightforward, because in all honesty, I don't feel we should be only on our third bill by now. These bills are acceptable, we should run through it. But the others, I want to have 7, 8 people speaking on one bill. Anyways, moving on. With the passing of these bills, we should ponder on a few things. I'm going to list three of them. Number one, are there enough facilities to house or place abused, neglected, or troubled children right now as we speak, passing these bills? Number two, are the employees at these facilities, if there are any, trained to deal or care for these children? And number three, what is the status or condition of the working environment of the division that's dealing with this matter? To be direct, that's the welfare division. Doing my research, because I know the other side like to tell us do our research. So I did a little research, not much, a little, be straightforward. Doing my research, I found out that there's only 2 facilities for children right now. One is Chances in Jimit, that's for abused, neglected children. And the Operation Youthquake, a non-profit organization located in Silver Lake, that's for juvenile delinquent children. As we speak, the facility in Jimit, namely Chances, can comfortably accommodate approximately 40 children at the moment. Mr. Speaker, since I know myself, the country has 70,000 people, approximately. We doesn't go up, we doesn't go down. So I want the other side, when they are coming back at me, I know they're coming back. I want the other side to tell me, how can Chances that can comfortably accommodate approximately 40 children cater for the entire country? Also, Operation Youthquake in Silver Lake can approximately accommodate 13 children based on my research.
That's what you focus on?
That's irrelevant at the moment.
That's right.
Moving on. So my simple question at this moment, in light of passing this amazing bill for the betterment of our children, can these 2 facilities accommodate our population? The answer is straightforward. 1 + 1 is 2. No. Right now, moving along again. I'm going to slide. I said I'm making it short and straight to the point. I'm going to slide into the welfare division right now. Slide, the electric slide, and I can slide. I think we are all aware of the condition of the welfare division office at the moment. It's not the best working environment. Me personally will never be in the correct state of mind to work in such conditions. Do all your research, I did mine. I am aware that I'm going to get from the other side. It is coming. Because that is their talk. It is coming. Just like every other thing is coming. Every single thing, it is coming. But we're still campaigning, so it's coming. So my question to the other side, and I wish someone would respond to me, when are we going to reach climax? When? That's it. Because I tell you, it's coming. By touching this 3 points, this is my short.
Yeah, proceed, Senator, proceed.
My short. As I said, I was going to be short and straight to the point because, in a nutshell, I do support this bill and all of the other 4 bills being passed today. So, being short and straight to the point, this is my contribution. And I will repeat again, I do support these bills. However, we should look at all aspects of passing this bill to ensure that it is effective. Right now, Mr. Speaker, I shall take my seat and I shall wait for the non-glasses wearing people on the other side to respond.
What you crying for?
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Yes, Honorable Lloyd, proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I rise to give my fullest consideration and support for the enactment of the Care and Adoption of Children Bill, which is before this Honorable House. And if you permit me, Mr. Speaker, I would like to refer to my notes during the course of my presentation.
Your permission is granted.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the children of Dominica are our pride and joy, and they are seen as our future leaders of this beautiful country. Mr. Speaker, and I stand on this side of this honorable house in full support of this bill. I'm glad to be a part of the process which would engender the manifestation of this saying, to engender the manifestation of this saying, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we as the present leaders of this country have every responsibility to ensure that we put in place the requisite laws, regulations, policies, and structures which will provide protection and care for their well-being, Mr. Speaker. And if there is any honorable member in this honorable house who believes that the onus is not on them, Mr. Speaker, then I can tell them, Mr. Speaker, that they're in the wrong place. Mr. Speaker, let me take this opportunity to thank the many individuals who have worked on various pieces of legislation before this honorable house. Former ministers, permanent secretaries, heads of divisions, and other staff of the various ministries. And today, Mr. Speaker, we are here as a government to continue the process and enact these critical bills which will give consideration for the well-being of our nation's children. Mr. Speaker, this bill has one of its primary purposes the care and protection of children from all forms of abuse and neglect. The interests of our children must be given paramount importance, and their interests must be at the core when decisions regarding their well-being are concerned. Mr. Speaker, the bill covers a number of areas and calls on all practitioners, parents, and all society dealing with children to help us determine the best interests of the child. The bill looks at the safety of the child, even the capacity of parents to properly discharge their responsibilities as parents. Mr. Speaker, parents must step up and take their parental responsibilities seriously. Nowadays, even parenting sessions are provided at various institutions by this government administration, just to ensure that parents are reminded of their roles and responsibilities. Mr. Speaker, I would like to emphasize roles and responsibilities of parents. And earlier, the Honorable Prime Minister alluded to responsibilities. Mr. Speaker, I believe that if parents were to recognize their responsibilities, that the issue of child care and protection would not be a challenge which would confront us here in Dominica, Mr. Speaker. We must concentrate on the whole child, not just what is provided physically, but the other critical areas such as mental, emotional, and psychological development of the child. Children with disabilities must be given special attention, Mr. Speaker. And I am so proud that just a few weeks ago, in the St. Joseph constituency, we recognized Down Syndrome Day, where we marched in recognition of Down syndrome. Because to me, Mr. Speaker, Down syndrome itself isn't the problem. The problem is the incognizance of individuals about Down syndrome, which poses a challenge in our society, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, and just to say that the children of Dominica are not offsprings of a cash cow, Mr. Speaker. And that if we just throw cash at them or throw money at them, that is going to solve the problem. No, Mr. Speaker, there are different substratas, Mr. Speaker, to childcare or where childcare is concerned. As I mentioned earlier, we have to look at the psychological needs of these children. We have to look at the mental and emotional needs of these children. So, Mr. Speaker, I believe that it does not take much effort. It does not take much effort to be a decent human being, to be a decent human being and to provide the much-needed childcare to our children in Dominica. The bill speaks clearly to the procedures to be followed when a child has suffered neglect and abuse. The Act gives timelines for various institutions to act with no reservation. The Act speaks to how investigations and assessments are to be done. Mr. Speaker, I urge every citizen, especially our adults, to familiarize yourself with these pieces of legislation before this House today. This will ensure that it is not business as usual when it comes to the care and welfare of our children. Far too long we have been complaining about abuse cases which take years to be heard in courts. Far too long we have seen and heard of the neglect and abuse of our children. Mr. Speaker, I can confidently say that this legislation has a clear section on emergency protection, assessment order, and care order. Mr. Speaker, and if there is reasonable grounds to believe that a child is in need of protection or the health and safety of that child is in jeopardy, then immediate action will be taken to get that child to a place of safety. Mr. Speaker, Clause 3, Section 2F speaks to the need to provide a secure place for the child and for the development of a positive relationship as a member of a family. This is very significant, Mr. Speaker, because some behaviors being displayed by some of our children at schools and in other social settings are generally because of the socialization that takes place at home, which is why I believe that we should be guarded against the malpractices that we may teach our kids, because a number of these issues stems from the parents. Children specifically need love and affection from their parents, along with other needs, and that also applies if a child is in an adopted family. And Mr. Speaker, as I speak about adopted families, Mr. Speaker, I believe that every household who is capable of or who is able to adopt a child should definitely do so. Because I believe that if every household who is able to adopt a child does so, then we would have no need for orphanages, Mr. Speaker. And that every child can receive love and care and affection, Mr. Speaker. I want to applaud the work which is being done at Chances. The state home for children which have been abused and neglected. The motto at Chances is it's more than a home, it's a family. And the love and care given to the children at that facility must be commended, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, the dear Senator asked the question, how can Chances accommodate our population? Mr. Speaker, I beg the question, Mr. Speaker, how can any facility in Dominica accommodate our population, Mr. Speaker? What population are we speaking about, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, are we tins? Are we sardines in a tin, Mr. Speaker? Mr. Speaker, we sometimes hear of parents who leave their children at home unsupervised for whatever reason. Sometimes it is to go to festivities, and the children are not adequately protected and may suffer abuse. We hear